What is up, you guys? Teller checking in for Dana White's Contender Series Week 6. Filming this late Friday night. I was just watching Junior Dos Santos beat down Fabricio Verdum. Verdum's eye was messed up pretty badly. Shout out to Jorge Masvidal with the Game Bred bare knuckle MMA promotion that he has going on over there. They certainly are not drug testing them, I'll tell you that much. When you see the fighters walking out to the cage taking their shirts off, Verdum had back acne everywhere. Both fighters are looking to be in some of the best shape that we've seen them in years. I don't understand how you look so much better, years and years later compared to how we saw them at the end of the road in the octagon. But you know what? I have no problem with it. It seems like everybody's in the loop, and Game Bred, they got no gloves, they got no drug testing, and you know what? The more MMA that's out there, the better. All right, so we got a 5-fight card here, of course, for Dana White's Contender Series, and we got a lot of fighters that have already fought on the show. 4 fighters: Malik Lewis, Stephen Wynn, Eduardo Neves, and Julia Palastri. All right, all 4 of those fighters have fought in the show. Of course, they've all tasted defeat, right? They're not in the UFC right now. They never got the contract. Now, Stephen Wynn did have another victory after his first loss in the show, but didn't get the contract there. So some good fights. You guys know how we do it. We'll start at the bottom. We'll work our way up.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
So what should be the first fight of the event, unless they change the event up the day before the fights like they did the other week, Julia Palastri taking on Patricia Lujas. Patricia fighting out of Paraguay. First and foremost, Julia Palastri, you guys remember she fought on Dana White's Contender Series. She took that loss to Jasmine Justavicius. It was a closely contested match, and we now know that Jasmine is a legitimate UFC caliber fighter. Jasmine used her grappling and her strength to edge that fight out. And when you understand at the time that Julia Palastri was only 23 years old and Jasmine was a much more physically mature fighter at the time, that loss doesn't look as bad. I think that Palastri is a good fighter. Even when I'm breaking down the tape on that fight, when I'm recapping that fight and even watching some of her other tape, she's a good fighter. She's a technical striker. She has some submission skills, as we've seen as of recently, coming off that arm triangle choke over an LFA over Brenda Gattig. Before that, she had another KO victory over an LFA over Bianca Saddlemeyer, and had a victory over Calandra Faria. That's a fighter that's fought in the octagon a couple times, never had her hand raised, but reached the octagon, and then that's dating back to that loss there. So her opponent, Patricia Lujas, this is a fighter that's 9-2. I'll say this much, as we watch Julia Palastri hitting the pads and whatnot, hitting the mitts, her opponent is not a bad fighter from what I've pulled up from her on tape. She has decent striking. And although I am definitely favoring Julia to go out there and get the job done, she seems to be the much more promising fighter. This is a fighter that I definitely think will be fighting in the UFC for some time to come. But I do believe that her opponent is somewhat game, and her striking looks decent. It's somewhat technical, and I could potentially see this fight playing out closer than some of you guys think that it's going to play out. All right, because we take a look at the betting line. Julia Palastri opened up as a minus 450. She was a minus 500 for a brief period of time. Now she's settling in right around a minus 400. She's probably going to be right in that range by the time the fight takes place. She's going to be a big favorite. If anything, I think that money will come back on her still. I think people are going to be very high on her in the spot. Maybe she'll be a 450 by the time the fight starts. And I would caution you, as high as I am on Julia, I think she's a good fighter. I would caution you just based on the fact that this is still a very young fighter. This is it says that this is a flyweight match at the time, even though they show 115 pounds, which would be strawweight. So not sure exactly what's going on there. I expect this to be in the strawweight division, though. This is a lower weight female mixed martial arts bout that could potentially play out closely on the feet. I'd caution you with those big lines there, but I think that Julia Palastri gets the job done. She seems to be a very technical striker and a well-rounded fighter. And, her opponent, you take a look at the 2 losses. She was finished once via rear naked choke, and that was back in 2017. So that was a while ago, and not fighting really high-level competition. This is going to be a step up in competition for the fighter fighting out of Paraguay. And I think that Julia gets the job done. If you guys really want to have action on this fight, mix in Julia in a parlay. Over to the heavyweight division, Eduardo Neves taking on Joe Hanata Denise. All right, trying to get that name nice there for you. Denise, the heavyweight Brazilian fighter who has a kickboxing background. Once again, another fighter on this season with that kickboxing background. He's fought over in Glory. He's been in there with some legitimate kickboxers too, and he even was able to survive, against a guy like Rico Verhoeven, who is a fighter that I have a lot of respect for. Went to a decision with him back in 2013. Okay, so he's been striking for some time, and he has some notable wins on his resume as well, man. He has some good experience. Over on the MMA side of things, he's 5-0. He's been knocking dudes out very early on, finishing them basically all in the first round. He's been using his striking to do that. He has some impressive finishes. You can pull some of them up on YouTube. Eduardo Neves, back to him. On his performance on Dana White's Contender Series against Mick Parkin, gassed out very early, was submitted, I believe, in the first round via rear naked choke by Mick Parkin. Mick Parkin, he's a good fighter. He proved that in his UFC debut just recently. He's a teammate of Tom Aspinall. Maybe that loss is not as bad as some of us think. It just, the way he looked wasn't the best, but Neves is more of a striking-based fighter. He's a very young fighter still, 23 years old. I haven't been really that impressed with what I've been seeing from him since that loss. I know he went out there and got 2 knockouts in a row. I'm still not really overly impressed with the tape I'm watching as far as the striking goes. I think that this fight's probably going to play out on the feet. That's what I expect to see. And I'm going to take the former Glory kickboxer and Denise there. I just think that that's I think that's the right way to go. And, some people may disagree with me because you take a look at the betting line. He opened up around a -160 line on Bet Online. He was a 170 for some time and whatnot. I think he was even a -190. Yes, he was on September 8th. And the line has been going the opposite way. He's now a -127. This line is almost at pick'em odds. I still feel more comfortable with Denise. This fight should take place in the feet. I think that Denise has shown to have a little bit more pop and just be a little bit more crisp with the striking. And, I'm a little curious what everyone's seeing in Eduardo Neves. I know he's young, and there's probably going to be a lot of growth in his game. Maybe he can mix in some grappling. And we also know that Denise hasn't really been tested in the MMA world, right? He's getting all these quick finishes. So if the fight goes late, I think people think that he may fade. And Neves, on the other hand, a little bit more proven. He's putting some rounds in. So I think that's the reason why, actually, as we dissect the fight. But I still will take the more polished kickboxer and a fight that I do expect to take place in the feet. And we very well could see an early finish, 2 heavyweights throwing down. In the bantamweight division, we have 2 undefeated prospects at a little bit of different points in their career. We have Gene Matsumoto, who's 24 years old and has more than double the amount of pro fighting experience over Casey Tanner, who's 31 years old, training out of Team Fight Ready, which is a good thing. Looks to be in phenomenal shape coming into this fight. Casey Tanner is a wrestler. You break down tape on him, that's definitely his strength. He likes to use his wrestling. He really pushes the pace with that. If he's going to get the job done here, he's going to really have to have success with his wrestling. I'm not impressed with what I've seen from him as far as the striking goes when I'm watching tape on him and on some of his fights I can pull up on YouTube, not including what I've been seeing on his Instagram, because the way he's popping up this jelly bean bag is not that impressive. I'm not really trying to toot my own horn over here, but I promise you guys, I could whack that bag up in a better fashion than we're watching Casey do that. Okay, now listen, Casey is a pro MMA fighter. He could probably scoop me up, drop me on my neck, and and finish me up. I have a little bit of size advantage on him. I don't want to sit over here like that one dude on YouTube. You guys know what I'm talking about. That juice head that's always asking these MMA fighters who would win in a street fight. I don't want to pull that off on you guys. But I do walk around 185, and Casey's walking around at like what? 145, 150. Listen, I ain't pulling that guys on you. I'm not pulling that on you. Casey would probably whip me up. Let's be real. But at the end of the day, Casey's taking on Gene Matsumoto, and I'm thinking that Matsumoto is going to be the much more well-rounded fighter here. I think that he's going to be the better striker. I think that he has some solid jiu-jitsu skills as well, that if Casey's going to force the takedown constantly, he could be in trouble there as well. And if Casey doesn't have that continued success, I could see him getting tired, and I could see Gene just kind of getting the better of him. We know that the format of the show doesn't favor that type of style, the wrestling style, the grueling style. If Casey's hanging on Gene, pressing him against the cage, we could see them separated. We could see the style of this fight favor a Gene Matsumoto. There's a lot of pressure for these fighters to go out there and perform and put on a show. Dana White's right there, and Casey's not really a guy that has, from what I've seen, really put on that type of. I don't know. I just don't see that type of ability against a step up in competition here in Matsumoto. Tanner's been fighting very low level competition. Tanner, his last fight was a year and 6 months ago, a year and a half ago, over in LFA. In that time frame, Matsumoto has fought 4 times. Okay. And Matsumoto fighting guys with a little bit of better resumes, better records, I should say. Sometimes you have to dive into the records of those opponents, though. He's beating guys with decent records, but you take a look at who they're fighting. They're fighting low-level fighters, so sometimes you really got to dive into it. There's some question marks here. I feel more comfortable taking the Brazilian, though. I think he shows more here. We take a look at the betting line. Gene Matsumoto, he opened up as a minus 250 favorite, and now he's a minus 150 favorite. So action going the other way. It's understandable because it kind of opened up pretty high, really. At minus 250 was too high of a line. Tanner still has some wrestling abilities, training over at Team Fight Ready, and he should be decently prepared. But Gene should be the more well-rounded fighter, and I could see him potentially gassing out Tanner, stopping those takedowns and pulling off a submission or even a finish with strikes. He's a well-rounded fighter, maybe a second-round finish one way or another, second or third-round finish one way or another. AJ Cunningham taking on Stephen Wynn, fight taking place in the featherweight division. This dude, AJ Cunningham, has a dark background, man. I really feel for the guy. If you guys haven't heard his upbringing, it's one of the worst ones you're going to hear on the Dana White's Contender Series show. As you guys know, they give you background on these fighters. Dude, AJ Cunningham, he grew up in Arizona. I think he was like one of 3 or one of 4 brothers. He had a very abusive dad, used to mess him up pretty bad. We're talking about some serious beatings and whatnot. Check this out. His dad was part of the Aryan Brotherhood, and was a sicko. Was trying to get his sons to be like these ultimate warriors, and was giving them steroids at a very young age. I mean, some of that stuff was pretty damn dark. And thank God he some type of light was shed to that situation, and his dad's now in prison or went to prison. And AJ Cunningham found a set of foster parents or adoptive parents, and they adopted all of him and his brothers. He moved over to Arkansas. I'm not sure if it's true or not. I heard that he's a relative of Bryce Mitchell. Maybe the adoptive parents were related to Bryce Mitchell or whatnot. That seems like that would be the case if it was, more like that would be the case if it was. I don't think Bryce Mitchell was related to the blood father and whatnot. But anyways, Cunningham, he's over in Arkansas now. This is a fighter that has a grappling ability, some wrestling ability. He's a little wild on the feet, but we've also seen him go out there and get some nasty knockouts. Saw him land a nasty head kick knockout. You could pull that fight over on YouTube, pull it up on YouTube. His opponent, Stephen Wynn, 1-1 on Dana White's Contender Series, a much more polished striker. He is a much more polished striker. He has a Taekwondo background, good boxing skills. He definitely has the potential to go out here and outpoint Cunningham using his striking ability. He's a good fighter. He's a very well-rounded fighter, training at a Fortis MMA. And listen, I could sit here and throw favorites your guys' way all day. I know you guys don't like that. And I'm not going to do it. I'm going to throw a dog your guys' way here. If I see a dog coming through on this card, which you guys know, there's always some wild dogs barking on Tuesday nights. I think that AJ Cunningham has the potential in the sense that he's an extremely mentally tough dude. You listen to his interviews. This is a guy that really believes in himself, and I think he'll be pushing. I sense some Trevor Peak type vibes from him. Maybe he's lacking and from a technical standpoint, but he's just very tough, and he'll march forward. And Stephen Wynn, he was knocked out by Alan Cruz, if you remember that, the first time he fought on Dana White's Contender Series. And Stephen Wynn's only fought 3 times in the last 4 years. He's been very inactive. And Alan Cruz, by the way, was working at Publix. If you guys don't know Publix, that's big in Florida. That's a big food mart. And Alan Cruz was bagging groceries when he walked into the cage and hit him with that flying knee in the 3rd round. Can AJ Cunningham land a wild strike and knock out Stephen Wynn? I don't know. I think there's some possibilities there. I think he's a tough grappler. He's a tough dude. And I think that AJ Cunningham has been becoming a better and better fighter fight to fight. When you watch some of his tapes on YouTube, You see that he's looking a little bit better as of recently. So coming off that rear naked choke victory 2 months ago, essentially 3 months ago at this point in time. Give me the dog, AJ Cunningham. I would love to see him go out there and get a contract. If you listen to some interviews from of him, he's a very soft-spoken, good dude, and he's been through some stuff. So I would just love to see him show up on the night. I think it would mean a lot to the dude who's been through some stuff. Now we take a look at the betting line. Check this out. Stephen Wynn is now a minus 244 favorite. As I was doing research earlier today and we're crunching numbers, Stephen Wynn was a minus 170 on Bet Online earlier. Not sure if you guys could see that, but it wasn't showing up on my other odds site. So a lot of action coming in on Stephen Wynn. And, I think that AJ Cunningham is potentially live. And at 2-1 odds, I think there's some value there. I think that AJ Cunningham is the dog that could potentially be barking on this episode of Tuesday Night Fights. Over to the main event. I promise you guys this fight's going to deliver from an entertainment standpoint. First and foremost, the Peruvian mixed martial arts scene has bursted on the scene over the last couple of years. You got some real fighters coming up recently. Of course, you have guys like Enrique Barzola back in the day that have set things off. Claudio Puelles has been looking good throughout the last couple of years. Daniel Marcos has been looking good as well. Daniel Marcos. And how about the fighter that kicked off the Dana White's card the other week? Another fighter that looked really, really good, went out there and got a stoppage. I think that James has the potential to be the next one of those fighters representing Peru. 24 years old. This is a fighter that really brings it. He's a scrappy dude. He's conditioned very well. This is a good test for him, though. Malik Lewis is a talented fighter, but Malik Lewis has some issues with his cardio. We saw that in the Trevor Peek fight 11 months ago when Trevor Peek withstood all the early punishment and then just broke Malik Lewis down. Now, Malik Lewis did bounce back with the victory over Paulo Silva. I want to talk a little bit more about that fight, though, in a second. We'll circle back to that fight. James is a fight finisher. James is a fight finisher. He has some sharp striking. He's been fighting over in the welterweight division, and now he's making the cut down to the lightweight division, which I think is the right thing for him. I think that he'll be a little bit more lean. I thought there was some weight that he could have let go, and I like the move for him here. He's a fighter that looks very sharp late in fights, and that's really where I give him an edge here. Malik Lewis, even in that last fight that he bounced back in the win column with against Paulo Silva, he finished that fight in the third round, man. He had Paulo Silva mounted, and he was throwing these Donkey Kong hammer fist on top of him for like 2 minutes before the referee finally had to stop the fight. And I say that in the sense that not that the referee was doing anything wrong, but the fact that Malik Lewis had no power on his shots because he was so gassed. And yeah, he continued to throw down, but it's like you look at the way that James looks when he's in the third round, man. He's throwing sharp attacks, and I just think that James is going to be the more conditioned fighter here. Malik Lewis is a good fighter. He's a well-rounded fighter. He has good wrestling skills, and he's a sharp striker. He's a skilled athlete, but there's something going on with him. There's something going on with him with his conditioning. I think he could work on that more so. Now, if you want to play devil's advocate, you could definitely say that the Peak was a learning experience for him. And then, training for that Paulo Silva fight, that was a 5-round championship fight. So he was training for a 5-round fight, and it did go to the very end of the third round. And he did put off a lot of volume in that fight. And, those are definitely learning experiences for him at 27 years old. But I still think that James is going to be the sharper fighter. I do. And, as long as James can push this fight to the later rounds, I think that he'll have a real edge. I really do believe that. So, yes, I am taking James to win the fight. Real quick, I want to take a look at James's 2 losses, if you don't mind here. So his last loss was in 2019. He did get submitted via rear naked choke, and then he had a decision loss before that. So, he was submitted once upon a time. Malik Lewis is a solid grappler. He does have some submission skills, or at least he has some decent grappling skills. But still, with that being said, I do have James Goku Llontop. How about Goku with the nickname? Kind of has that hair. I was a big Dragon Ball Z guy back in the day, man. When I was in 5th grade, I was a huge Dragon Ball Z guy. I was a Vegeta guy, all right? I was a Vegeta guy. I'm sure a lot of you guys could tell. I'm sure a lot of you guys were like Krillin fans and, Goku and the good guys. I'm always on the bad side. At least I kind of gravitate towards those type of guys. But Vegeta was a good guy too, right? Good guy, but he had a little bit of a different personality. All right, but real quick, let's take a look at this betting line. James is a minus 185 right now. He opened as a minus 225, and he actually touched the minus 145 line just just a little bit ago, earlier this afternoon, he was a minus 145. So a lot of action coming in on him. And I think that people are familiar with the Malik Lewis name. They know he's a talented fighter. That's why action was coming in on Malik Lewis. But the more they put the puzzle pieces together, I think people are seeing that James will be the sharper fighter as this fight goes on and becomes a war, which I think a lot of people are expecting this fight to be a war. That's what I'm expecting. And, the later the fight goes, it favors James. So give me James to get the job done there. All right. And at minus 185, you definitely want to grab it. You would have wanted to grab it lower, and maybe there's some potential it dips back the other way. We'll see. Anywhere under that minus 200 line, I don't have a problem with it. I think this kid James is pretty good. That's how I feel about that. All right, guys. So that's going to wrap up DWCS Week 6. I appreciate all your guys' support. I actually recorded this whole episode here, and my microphone had an issue. Hopefully it did not have an issue this time. I'm just wrapping this up at 2 a.m. Friday night, and I had a full belly, some fried stir-fried steak that I cooked up before I did this, and I had to record this twice. As you guys can see, I'm a little groggy. It's late, kind of like a bear about to go in hibernation right now. But you know what, man? I had to get this video out to you guys, so I wanted to make sure I got this done. And I appreciate all your guys' support. Quick side note, the Valentina Shevchenko versus Alexa Grasso video will be uploaded most likely Tuesday. And then I will have the recap of UFC 293, which I have 4 big-time plays going down. I will have that recap video out to you guys Monday, most likely. But again, if you follow me on Instagram, MMA Fortune Teller _, you guys can keep up to date with me up to the minute. I'm on Instagram all the time, so remember, you could catch me over there as well. And I'm on Twitter at the MMA Teller. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, guys. I know that's going in one ear, not the other, but if you could do it, it means a lot to me. All right, I'm gonna go pass out. Signing out, Teller.
Welcome to the show. This the MMA Fortune Teller. Yeah.
The MMA Fortune Teller.
The teller.